Please subscribe to hear more Cryptid Tales. If you like the story you heard, give us a thumbs up and feel free to leave us a comment. If you'd like to hear your own cryptid encounter on Cryptid Tales, send us an email at cryptidtalesmail@gmail.com. When my father passed away, I inherited the family farm in the more rural area of Ohio, just as he did when my grandfather passed. I was raised on this farm and spent the better part of my life on this farm. Since I was a child, and even still today, I feel uneasy being all alone on the property. To give all of you a summarized version on my background, I consider myself an outdoorsman. Growing up on a farm with my father, we were either working on the daily chores, or we would be hunting, fishing, and camping. I eventually left and traded farm life for military life in the United States Army as a paratrooper in the 101st Airborne Division. Shortly after joining the 101st, I went to Ranger School and got my Ranger tab, one of my proudest moments. I'm proud of all my accomplishments and accolades, but by far my most prized achievement for my military career was surviving the Special Forces assessment and selection process, which ultimately led to the rest of my time in the Army spent in Special Forces, and eventually finishing my military career as the executive officer on a Special Forces team, which is a glorified way to say that I was second in command. That being said, I was trained for years to pay attention to details that most would overlook and consider unimportant. I was also taught to never show fear, but what I'm about to tell you changed me more than the combat did. While I was going through my father's belongings, I came across his old hunting shotgun. I figured as a tribute to him, I would harvest one last white-tailed deer with the shotgun. While I was out scouting the area I would be hunting over, I had the strange, uneasy feeling that I felt as a child overcome me again. You know that feeling you get when the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end? I felt exactly that in this moment. I felt as if I was being watched and even followed by someone or something. It was clear to me I wasn't alone in the woods that day. Whether or not you choose to believe me is irrelevant, because what I felt was not my nerves. My blood ran cold at the mere thought of who or even what could possibly be watching me or following me. When I eventually decided to leave, I left the area as quietly as possible. I played it off as something like my mind playing tricks on me. I was recently diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder from the time spent in combat, coupling that with the sixth sense all hunters have, and you see why I might think it would be nothing more than a trick of my mind. The next day, when I went back to the area I had chosen for my hunt, I noticed the woods around me were eerily silent, which was unusual to say the least. My woods were always overflowing with life. There were no animals running around, no woodpeckers, no rabbits, no bugs, but more importantly, no deer. A few hours passed, and as I got comfortable against the tree I had chosen to watch from, when almost suddenly I became overwhelmed. Oh, jeez. A few hours passed, and as I got comfortable against the tree I had chosen to watch from, when almost suddenly I became overwhelmed with the worst smell I have ever experienced. Not too long after that, I noticed something odd in the distance. I saw with my naked eye what can only be described as a giant, upright, hairy humanoid figure walking towards me. I determined that whatever this was had to be no less than 80 yards away. I looked through the scope on my father's shotgun to get a better look at the creature. What I saw is an image I will never forget. Whatever I was looking at had a human-like face, broad shoulders, and long reddish-brown hair all over its body. The creature had to be at least 8 feet tall, and its arms hung low, so low that its hands were almost to its knees, and the arms had to be the size of a 4x4 fence post. I ultimately decided to shoot just over its head to attempt to scare it off. I didn't want whatever it was getting too close. I have little doubt in my mind that if it had gotten its hands on me, I wouldn't be here to talk about my experience. After I shot, whatever it was let out the most blood-curdling yell or howl. I can't even begin to describe the noise it made, but whatever noise it was, it made my body freeze up. I had gone into what many call fight or flight mode. My body was full of fear, and my adrenaline was pumping furiously through my veins, a feeling I hadn't felt since my introduction to combat. I waited for the longest hour of my life before getting up to ensure that whatever I saw was gone. After I got my nerve back, I got up and went to investigate the area I had seen the creature come from, and I saw the biggest footprints in my entire life. My father's shotgun has a 28-inch barrel. After comparing the length of the prints to the gun barrel, I guessed that these footprints had to be at least 20 inches long. My grandfather and father told me stories about the Ohio grassman when I was a child. For those who are unfamiliar with the grassman myth, they are Ohio's Bigfoot. Growing up, I always thought they were just a boogeyman tale that they would tell me to scare me and to keep me out of the woods. Both my father and grandfather always told me that these creatures lived here on this land long before our family did. Whatever it was I saw that day, I can't say for sure, but myths don't scare me out of my woods. But I will no longer go to that area of what is now my farm. That happened several years ago. I'm out of the Army and living on the farm now to this day. I still get that feeling like I'm being watched. I hear them howling and screaming at night sometimes too. I've told people about my encounter before, but they all say the same thing. You're just seeing things because of the PTSD. I no longer walk through my woods unless I absolutely have to now, and when I do, I have a firearm on me. I will also no longer go out at night. I don't think what I saw was a side effect of my post-traumatic stress disorder, and I also don't think it was a person in a costume. The face, that face. As long as I live, I'll never forget it. If you're ever in the backwoods of eastern Ohio on a hike or camping trip, and you get that strange feeling that you're not alone out in the woods, and that you are being watched, trust your instincts. Because if you take one thing from my experience, let it be this. When you go out into the woods, and you think you're all alone, think again. So when I was younger, I lived out in the country with my family. I'd just gotten finished helping my father cut some wood, and felt like getting out before dinner. I got on my bike after packing my knapsack with some beef jerky I could eat if I got hungry. I got some earbuds too and packed my MP3, placing it in my sweatshirt pocket. I went out to get my bike and mounted, and making sure my helmet was in place, I started riding down the road, enjoying the late afternoon sun as fingers of sunlight reached to the road I was going down, and the brisk fall air breezed by in my face. After biking for what must have been an hour and listening to my music playing, I was far away from my home and decided to stop for a snack. I unmounted my bike and removed from my knapsack some of that beef jerky. I leaned against a tree, eating the snack as I surveyed the woods around me, quiet and peaceful. I still couldn't hear anything with my earbuds in, but after I had finished my third beef jerky piece, I caught a smell. It was terrible, smelling like trash, BO, and worst of all, death. A little bit confused, and honestly a bit spooked, I remounted my bike and put my beef jerky back in my knapsack. A chill ran down my back as I got back on, but hadn't started yet. I shivered in response, and it was then I recognized the sensation I was having. The feeling that I was being watched. I quickly began pedaling again, not too alarmed, as there were many squirrels or owls that could be watching me. I reminded myself that I would be getting away from the smell and was eager to do so. Once I got going again, with my music in my ears, I began to relax and forget about my strange stop. It was when I was about 5 minutes in when I realized the smell hadn't gone away. I wasn't going very fast, maybe a brisk walking pace at most, so it wasn't that unbelievable to me, but I was still creeped out. I got spooked again and began biking faster. Just in case, I took out one of my earbuds so I could be more alert. I got going again, but I stopped only a matter of seconds later when I heard something. A branch breaking ominously behind me in the woods. At this point, my mind started racing, and I convinced myself someone was following me. I began crafting a story in my head of how I was just about to get murdered in the woods and never seen again. The smell was still there, and I was ready to turn back and ride as fast as I could back home. I turned around on my bike and began pedaling fast. After a couple minutes, I calmed down enough to resume my brief walking pace, but I had paused my music and was on edge. That was when it happened. A rock came flying out of the woods and hit me right in the side of the head. I crumpled to the ground, my bike skittering on the dirt road as I only registered pain. I got up and felt my cheek and pulled away blood. I tried to get my bearings of what the heck had just happened. I looked at where the relatively small rock was laying on the road and looked into the woods. What the heck was that for? I shouted into the woods. I waited, but nothing answered. I was just about to get up off the ground when a sound froze me right where I was. A deep growl from somewhere not far away in the woods. I waited, too petrified to say hello, and began to pray that my death would be quick if someone was going to kill me. Suddenly, another branch snapped only a few feet away. My head snapped in that direction, and I saw it. The first thing that registered with me was that it was covered in dark brown fur, and then I noticed its height. It was much taller than anyone I had ever known, and its head was level with a high branch on the tree. Its eyes shone in the evening light, and it grunted when I saw it. I couldn't help but gasp, and the creature growled in return and approached my bike slowly. I stayed there, frozen on the ground, and was ready to let the creature do whatever it wanted to do. I was remarkably calm for the situation, and decided to let it leave on its own before I moved and possibly gave it a reason to attack me, to end me. I waited and waited, the only sound coming from the rustling leaves and the gentle autumn breeze and the Bigfoot's deep breathing. Finally, it moved forward and I flinched, thinking it was coming for me. But then I saw it was approaching something else. My eyes followed its eyes focus and saw it. My knapsack that had flown off my back when that rock had hit me. I laid there silently as the creature reached over for my knapsack. It looked at me as it leaned down, as if daring me to move. I didn't, and didn't even look it in the eye, knowing it could take that as a challenge, an excuse to kill me. It grabbed my knapsack, again pausing, and I could only feel my breathing as we were only 2 feet apart. It stood back up again, knapsack in hand, and sniffed it. It grunted, but it huffed and ran off into the woods, in the same direction it had come from. When I was sure it was gone, I grabbed my helmet and, not even bothering to clip it back on, rushed home. I don't know how long it took, and I couldn't tell you. I was so terrified at what had just happened. It could have been 5 minutes or 5 hours. My mind was all I could focus on. When I got home, I threw my bike in the garage and thought about my encounter before going in. I was shaken, but I was fine. That was an encounter I would never forget. My parents and brothers asked what had happened to my knapsack, and all I could tell them was that I forgot it. They asked if I wanted to go back for it, but I couldn't answer them. That night, the only person I told about my experience was my oldest brother, but he only laughed and told me to stop lying. I've never told anyone since, and I will never forget it.